I have crossed 41 transit hubs in the 11 years since I mustered out of the 14th Handler Corps. 41 hubs, 7 different coalition flags, and 1 Beagle. I have never been asked to remove the Beagle until the Vithara Hegemony tried it at Docking Hub. Caraway 9. And I want to be precise about how that went, because the incident report they filed afterward described it as an equipment malfunction, and that is not what happened. Rufus is 11 years old. He has a tan saddle and white chest and a black patch over his left ear that has gone slightly gray at the edges since his last birthday. He weighs 14 kilograms. He does not bark in transit corridors. He walks at my left heel, and when I stop, he sits, and when I sit, he lies across my boots. He has done this since he was 8 weeks old in a Handler Corps kennel on Meridian Station when he was assigned to me as a pup, and the Corps psychologist wrote in the intake file that the dog displayed, quote, unusually calm threat assessment for his age. The Corps psychologist was being careful with her language. What she meant was that Rufus did not react to loud noises, sudden movements, or armed strangers the way other dogs did. He reacted the way I did, is to say, he assessed, and then he went back to whatever he was doing. I had 2 hours before my connecting ferry to the outer settlement's leg. Rufus had his lead clipped to my left hand, and his transit authorization chip logged with the hub's animal registry, logged, cleared, and time-stamped before we crossed the threshold. Because I have been doing this for 11 years and I do not give bureaucracies an opening, we found a bench near the far window wall where the light came in flat and white off the docking arm. Rufus lay down with his chin on my boot and closed his eyes. The first marshal arrived 6 minutes later, pale green scaling, hegemony blue sash, a posture that said he had delivered bad news to smaller creatures before and found it straightforward. He told me the Beagle was unregistered under Hegemony companion protocols. I told him it was registered under Coalition transit protocols, superseded them at this hub under the Caraway Accords. He told me the Hegemony did not recognize the Caraway Accords as binding on companion animals. I pulled out my transit authorization printout and set it on my knee. Rufus did not open his eyes. 2 more marshals arrived. This is a thing that happens when the first one does not get the outcome he expected. He calls for weight. The 2 new ones were larger. One with a retractable containment pole clipped to his hip, and they positioned themselves in the way that is meant to communicate that the conversation had changed character. Rufus opened his eyes at that point. He looked at the one with the containment pole. Then he put his chin back on my boot. I said, I'm not moving him. The first marshal said the animal would need to be secured in a certified Hegemony holding unit pending review of the transit documentation. He said it with the flat certainty of someone who had never been told no by anything that didn't immediately reconsider. I said, easy, Rufus. Rufus had not moved. He was already easy. I say it out of habit, maybe because I find it clarifying. For the room, not for the dog. The dog doesn't need it. The marshal with the containment pole unclipped it. He extended it to about half length and took a step toward us. And this is the part I want to be precise about. He did not complete the step. He got his weight onto the forward foot and then he stopped, because Rufus had raised his head. Rufus was not growling. He was not showing his teeth. He was not doing anything that could be described as aggressive under any reasonable definition. He was lying with his chin lifted off my boot, looking at Illness, and his tail made one slow movement. Not a wag exactly, more like an acknowledgement, the way a metronome ticks once to tell you it's running. His eyes were soft, his ears were low. He was by any outside measure completely relaxed. The marshal stopped moving. I don't know what Rufus looks like to something that evolved on a world where the top of the food chain is a 6-limbed, amphibious pack hunter, and the defining survival trait is the ability to read threat signals in competitors. I have some guesses, based on 11 years of watching rooms change when Rufus looks at things. I think he looks like a creature that has already finished calculating and is waiting for you to catch up. I think the math comes across very clearly, even across species. I think the 14 kilograms is not the number that registers. The 4th marshal arrived. He was older than the others, higher sash. The kind of stillness in his face that means he has seen his share of situations that went wrong, because someone pressed when they should have read the room. He looked at his colleague, still frozen with a half-extended containment pole, and then he looked at Rufus. And then he looked at me. I handed him the transit authorization printout. He read it, he handed it back. He said something to his colleagues in Vithara Primary that I do not speak well enough to translate precisely, but the word he used for Rufus, I've had it translated since, is a term used in old Hegemony military doctrine for a class of opponent you do not engage unless you are certain of the outcome. It is not used for pets. It is used for things that have walked through fire and come out the other. Side still walking, the three marshals left. The fourth lingered a moment, looked at Rufus one more time, and then he left too. Rufus put his chin back on my boot. We sat there in the flat white light from the docking arm window until my ferry was called. He slept for most of it, the way he always does. Completely, without twitching, with his breath slow and even and his paws relaxed open. An alien family took the bench 20 meters down the wall, and their youngest kept looking at us with the wide-eyed stillness that young things have when they are trying to understand what they are looking at. I don't try to explain it anymore. The duty officer filed the incident as an equipment malfunction, and I signed nothing, and Rufus ate his dinner from his travel bowl on the ferry deck and fell asleep against my leg before the docking clamps had fully released. Some things you can't file correctly. You just mark the column closed and move on.